Welcome to Charity Village Connects. I'm Mary Barrell. It's not news that nonprofits in Canada are notoriously slow when it comes to investing in new technology. Will they be left behind when it comes to the new AI tools that are already revolutionizing our world and our work? Well, not if we can help it. In this episode of Charity Village Connects, we're exploring practical ways with real world examples of how AI can be used by nonprofit organizations to streamline workflow, add efficiencies, and be used to complete repetitive administrative tasks in order to free up humans for more important and impactful work. Is there a way to responsibly and effectively harness the power of AI for social good? To help us explore the potential and discuss the issues, please welcome Elena Yunusov, founder and executive director for the Human Feedback Foundation, fostering a more open, human-centered, and transparent future for AI. Human Feedback Foundation team also runs a popular, the LLM reading group on Discord with 1,200 plus members hosting AI researchers from OpenAI, Cohere, Google DeepMind, and various universities. Elena's innovation driven career spans emerging technology, the public sector, and journalism. And through her firm, Communicable Inc., Elena has served a wide range of startups and corporate clients, including Ritual, Deloitte, Mars, DMZ, Wealth Simple, Influitive, City of Toronto, Design Exchange, TWG, and others. She's been nominated for RBC Canadian Women Entrepreneur Awards and named among top women in Canadian tech by BetaKit. Welcome to the podcast, Elena.
Thank you. Thank you, Mary. Thanks for having me.
Well, the RAISE program was recently launched to help Canadian nonprofits engage with AI. What inspired this initiative, and why are programs like this so important?
What inspired this initiative is us looking for leverage points to see where human centered AI would come from, since that's the mission of human feedback, and our experience working with the Canadian Cancer Society, where we help them educate leadership and executive leadership teams on responsible AI principles, helping them scope projects and look at the data and do that type of assessment, as well as talk to our friends at Kids Help Phone to learn from their journey and what barriers for adoption that they had and how they overcome them. And so it's come from consultations and many conversations about what can we do as a sector to move into the age of AI. And so for Raise to come up with even the proposal, we've worked with members of our consortium from CAMH. Sorry, can we restart this again?
Sure, no problem.
Working with the members of our consortium, with Community Foundations of Canada, with UHN, with ACHEV and others, to better understand the barriers and the challenges before we designed what we thought would be a thoughtful pilot to even see what we can practically accomplish together to move the adoption dial from left to right for the sector. So it's really grounded in actual work and consultation with the sector and collective thinking about a better future that hopefully we can all help shape.
Well, that's great because that's exactly what we wanted to talk about today. Actually having real practical kind of examples that we could share with the nonprofit sector at large and other organizations that are, AI curious and might not have had the courage yet to dive right in. I wonder if you could tell us what organizations will be involved. Can you give us some details as to the work that they'll be doing as part of the program?
So yes, we've structured the program for large organizations that have the data to go into the organizational AI adoption track delivered in collaboration with CDL. And then for small to medium organizations to benefit from the program, we focused on upskilling to build that capacity for two types of audiences, nonprofit leaders in organizations who could use literacy for responsible AI principles, governance, and policies in their organizations, and then frontline staff and delivery, uh, where it's more about using the existing third party tools well, mitigating risk for their organizations, but also being a sophisticated user of the tools, knowing what's available and what to use when and why, and doing so ethically and responsibly. So grounded in practical skills development. Those are the two courses that Team U, through the DAES, in collaboration with the Human Feedback Foundation, will be launching hopefully soon. And so I can't wait for that enrollment to open up, because the organizational AI adoption track is now been filled, and the 5 organizations that are part of that are Achev, Canada Helps, Canadian Cancer Society, CAMH Foundation, and the Furniture Bank.
Oh, that's great. And what kind of real world use cases are you seeing where nonprofits are already using AI successfully? We did speak to the Furniture Bank, and actually, I've spoken to them because their leader is a great enthusiast of all things tech, but especially AI. Um, what kind of real world cases are you seeing where nonprofits are really seem to be making the leap and doing it successfully?
So it's a really interesting question, because I've searched far and wide for case studies. That's what I really wanted. And I started that search over a year ago, when this program was just the Google Doc and the conversation. And so this isn't a sector that's known for bold leaps into the unknown, and doing a lot with tools that are evolving every day. And so globally, I think, especially with RAISE and work that Canadian nonprofits are doing, I really think we're leaders in adoption. It's exciting place to be in. We have leaders at Kids Help Phone and Furniture Bank, leading the way and showing others how it's done and sending ripples throughout the sector. Canadian Cancer Society, that has done a lot of work internally to look at use cases, and so thoughtfully approach AI adoption from a first principle of augmenting and not replacing human in the loop and human intelligence and agency and contributions, which is so important for the sector, not to lose that human connection that we have. And it's so central to the mission too. And so I am inspired by the cases that I've seen in the US. Another one I would mention is McGovern Foundation and the work that it's done with Anthropic for a use case centered on financial due diligence on the philanthropy side, and how philanthropies are being swamped with applications, and of course, none of it being standardized, and so requiring a lot of work and to reconcile one sheet with another sheet format. And that type of implementation, I think, makes a lot of sense, because ultimately the funders want a way to assess what should be funded, and financial due diligence being streamlined is a positive, significantly uh, relieving and reallocating the resources towards a higher level of decision making. So those are the types of use cases that I think are great. Is where you, um, like with Kids Help Phone, the use case there is about when their calls 10x over the pandemic. They've worked with Vector Institute to enable them to do triage more effectively and push calls with suicidal intent to the volunteers faster. And so those types of implementations are extremely amazing, because in their cases, I think that one model that they've developed is saving lives today. And so it's those types of use cases are amplifying and augmenting and helping organizations deliver on their really important missions. And I think they're grounded in human-centered principles that we hope to advance and help shape. And I'm excited that Canadian nonprofits globally are looking at AI as a massive amplifier for that type of work.
It is exciting. Now, Ray's emphasizes responsible and inclusive AI. What are some of the biggest ethical challenges you see when it comes to AI adoption in the social impact space?
One of the biggest challenges that I would identify, and there are many, and people have very good reasons asking these types of questions internally in their organizations. But my personal pet peeve is about data, and the dangers there of balancing and the necessity of balancing data collection with privacy preserving concerns and ethical and bias related concerns. It's a twofold challenge. On one hand, you would want to maybe minimize data collection because if you are serving vulnerable populations, maybe you don't want to collect as much data about them. And so, from an intent of protecting the vulnerable constituents in your purview, on the other hand, of course, by not collecting information about them, you may be in danger of perpetuating biases because with AI feeding on data, you can't then offer that data to AI systems, and therefore there is a danger then of biasing service delivery based on the previous data that you have collected. And so that's in the AI space called data deserts. And so that is a concern because we do not want to perpetuate inequality with these systems and tools. And that does go back to the types of data that is available internally in large organizations and how it is being collected and how it's being stored and shared and how ready it is for AI now, but also 5 years from now, because unfortunately, I think we're at a place where not implementing these tools won't be an option for much longer. And so we're very excited to work with organizations that are ready to chart the course for others, because I think the more we sit on the sidelines as a sector, the higher the costs of that will be. I would rather we do this now for essentially pennies on the dollar and learn it and then have the systems that can be evolving as the technology evolve, which in the AI context fundamentally does start with data for large organizations and education and upskilling for small to medium organizations for them not to expose their organizations to dangers, because there the ethical concern would be to um, inadvertently expose their organizations to risk and the people that they serve because they've used a third party tool that, I don't know, leaked all of the donors' data, and that would be terrible for organizations. And so, very cognizant of that. But there are many other challenges that we've seen people articulate, and I am happy that we have a program now where we can hopefully address them in some sort of systemic way, not sweep them under the rug, but also understand that I don't think we are at the place where we can ignore AI forever. And so while it's not perfect, we do need to first of all be sophisticated users and adopt it responsibly and ethically best we can using best practices, but also help shape the development of technology going forward to bring that missing voice, the civil society voice, to the stakeholder table where AI technology future is being shaped.
Yes, I mean, it is the nonprofit sector is so distinct and unique, and the ethical challenges are pretty enormous in and of themselves, even before you get into the AI issues and how that could impact the things that they do. Some staff might be reluctant to use AI tools due to their ethical concerns or their fear of, making a mistake and causing harm. Do you have any thoughts on how organizations might work through this challenge and so that um, staff members, leaders can comfortably explore and embrace AI?
I think nonprofits are amazingly lucky from a change management standpoint because they are mission driven organizations. And so, even looking at how Kids Help Phone has done change management, and I think they've done amazing work around that, it's the thoughtfulness of tying it back to the mission always. And for it not to be, oh, there's new technology and therefore we should all learn it, rain or shine. There is a reason for why these things are important, and tying it back to the mission I think helps people understand the role that they can play in that step change that organizations will go through. Now if people opt out of that change, it will of course be individual case by case basis within specific organizations, but I hope that it can be resolved by anchoring things at the mission level, and looking at how AI can support and supercharge that and address the fears and ethical concerns grounded in that, and in the industry best practices that do exist for organizations to have certainty and the level of assurance that they are doing it best they can do, and involving people in these conversations internally, involving them in the design of these systems, in these decisions, at variety of levels, because even from an use case discovery standpoint, from very early days, doing so in isolation in the boardroom won't get you the diversity of points of view that will surface the use cases and ultimately strengthen the organization. And so I think it's an opportunity more than the danger. It's just that you have a once in a lifetime opportunity to really engage people in something extremely meaningful that will touch them in the variety of roles that they sit in and have a way for them to be heard, whether it's through use case discovery, through testing and validation, through the building and implementation. There are so many points of intervention for people that I hope ethical concerns can take somewhat of a backseat. Um, and I understand how serious those can be. And of course, not every organization will go through the AI adoption journey now. And I think because of technology evolving as fast as it does, there may be organizations doing it a year from now, 2 years from now, 5 years from now, and ethical concerns may look very different then.
Right.
And so it is a conversation that is absolutely worth having from one organization to the next.
You've talked about how you remain human centered in terms of the values of the organization. And I'm curious, how can nonprofits ensure that the AI tools do amplify that human centered values, especially when working with vulnerable or marginalized communities?
So some of it, of course, through the data collection policies. I've sort of alluded to that before, but collecting data, and making sure that you have the right type of data and the structure of it to prepare organization for that journey, because you might have to do this if not now, then a year from now, 5 years from now. But the data part, extremely important, and you don't want to bias against the vulnerable populations in the how of you collect all of the data sets, and for it not to amplify inequality. So that part is extremely important. And of course, I would insist on, if possible, involving them in the system design as well, whether it's through some sort of feedback loops or design charrettes or some other types of consultations. Because if you, and of course, being transparent about the systems that are being built, if they are going to affect the level of delivery or some kind of service delivery, so that people can thoughtfully opt out if they are concerned. Um, about the data collection, for example, piece, for there to be a power balance, for there to be a voice internally within organizations for different functions, but also externally for who they serve and the stakeholders and members and constituents and clients. For it not to be a closed door exercise, for there to be a transparency throughout. I think that would be a human centered design principle. And of course, AI tools are not done once they're launched. There needs to be an ongoing monitoring and evaluation of the systems in place. And of course, that needs to be built into the transformation plan. And there needs to be a voice for people who the systems are affecting. Should there be any signs of any inadvertent second, third order consequences, for that to surface faster.
We've heard that funding and capacity is the most common barriers that nonprofits face in implementing AI. Is that true? How can these issues be overcome? I mean, certainly nonprofits these days are pretty strapped for cash and are really resource light. Um, what would you say to nonprofits that are being challenged by this?
So I think it's an opportunity to do more with less, which the sector is amazing at doing. And AI is, in some cases, that magic wand that an organization can put in place to supercharge their mission, like its help phone has done, and get to suicidal intent faster and save lives as per the stated mission in that organization. So it's being strategic about resource deployment, which organizations already are, but understanding the opportunity and constraints of AI, which may not be there for them to make informed choices. And building capacity, whether it's upskilling or if it's an organizational AI adoption track, working through the internal governance and policy review and resource allocation and budgets for technical implementation, um, is worthwhile doing, because again, I really do think that if we don't do it now, the debt will accumulate over time. And so if we think we're lagging behind now, given the resources that go into commercialization of the technologies on the industry side, it won't be a gap, it will be a chasm, and it won't be as easy to then catch up to even deliver the services and the level of work that we do now. Because what I hear when I talk to organizations in our cohort and then in the consortium and beyond is that the demands for the type of work that nonprofits do are going up. And I fear that that will continue given the state of our economic growth and where we are as a country and the way our population is growing. And just the strain on will only go up. And so I feel if we are not putting the floor that is future proofing the sector, it just won't be as easy to do a few years down the road. And it's still fairly easy to do it now.
Yes, I've heard from AI experts that the train has left the station, and you got to get on that train, or you won't be able to catch up later when it's developed so much more sophistication. How can nonprofit boards and leadership teams integrate AI into organizational strategy rather than seeing it as a standalone tech issue? I mean, I think it's a mentality kind of thing that is also a bit of a barrier, maybe among people of my age or generation, that tech is over here, and not integrated into the entire organizational kind of strategy and operational plans.
I think that's a really valid question, and I go back and forth on how I frame conversations about this, because AI to me is not a technology. And I think that's really important to understand. It's a socio-technical system. And the social part of it is as important as the technology part of it. They go hand in hand. It's why our nonprofit, Human Feedback Foundation, is a social technical nonprofit. And there is work that we do on the technology side, and then there's work we do on the social impact side, and they're both correlated. And so I think it's important for the leaders to understand that there are roles, very important stewardship and governance roles for them to play, that you can't give it to the IT manager the way you would the build of a mobile app and say, hey, you go figure it out, you're an IT. And so the boards, I think, once they understand that there is a governance responsibility and extreme risks that doing it wrong represent to their organization, once they understand that, then the conversation becomes very quickly about the how and the what do we need to know, because they understand that lands with them, as do the executive leaders in the organizations, that you can't treat it as an implementation of a third-party CRM. It's just, it will have that component, but it has a very significant strategy and change management and designing it as you fly, based on the use case that's tied to the mission piece. That this isn't technology we're talking about. We're talking about organizational change and future proofing organizations going forward. And so there is a argument to be made, and that is why we designed the program to have a course through TMU on governance and responsible AI for nonprofit leaders. It's because we do need to move it at that leverage point. It's not enough to educate frontline staff and have them be literate about using the tools. In small to medium organizations, especially, boards and executive leaders play a really significant role. And we've also had to get the executive level support for the organizational AI adoption track. And so that is something we've looked at and evaluated through the application process, whether that type of support and buy-in is in fact in place, because it's just still early days. And so we can't be at the place where organization is going through a massive journey on AI adoption and the board is not involved at all, and hands off, and execution is with someone at the senior level of leadership. It just won't work as well. And so it is both top down and bottom up, and both need support and literacy.
You mentioned a course, I think, and I'm curious: are there ways smaller organizations can work together to pool knowledge or infrastructure around AI adoption? For example, I mean, you're talking about providing a course about I think you said governance issues and such like. Rather than each one of them trying to do it alone. I mean, they have such little resources and small teams frequently. Um, what are your thoughts around that?
So we've heard it through the proposal development, and that is the piece that falls with us as our deliverable. Our job is to deliver a playbook and the roadmap and the set of frameworks, assuming there is no follow-on funding. The worst use case would be, okay, great, we've worked with 5 large organizations and they've gone from 0 to 1 and we've upskilled 500 people, and that's amazing. But to your point, what have we done to externalize the learnings? What have we done to capture it and share it with the sector more widely? And so that is our role, and we are drafting the playbook right now. We're sending it for review to a multidisciplinary network of experts, from privacy lawyers to nonprofit leaders to AI experts, policy experts, etc., and data leaders, for us to then deliver a draft that will iterate on and augment with case studies from the 5 large nonprofits that are going through the organizational AI adoption track, but also from the experience of just doing the program delivery through Team U and hearing the types of questions that will inevitably come up and finding ways to address them where we see a pattern forming, and codifying that through the playbook as well for it to be useful to organizations no matter the size, because the two types of organizations are going through the program. And so this there will be this third party uh, set of tools and playbook and frameworks as a set of resources for the sector to use. We are working on phase two, on thinking through what phase two could look like for how we scale this, because the problem, I think, is just so important. How do we move the sector into the age of AI? How can we accelerate that adoption and do so responsibly and safely? How can we learn from the industry best practices, but then contextualize them for the nonprofit sector where we are mission driven and not necessarily bottom line? And so, how can we do that thoughtfully are all questions that keep us up at night. And we have started working through a document outlining for what the phase two of this project could look like. And I ask organizations and invite them to reach out to me through either LinkedIn or email at elena@humanfeedback.io, because we are looking for thought partners and funders to support the development of that phase two for what do we do once this is done, because it will be done in 2026. And I don't think, as much as I love the program, it's still a small step among many steps that we need to take to bring the sector over the chasm that is forming. And so we are thinking systemically and we are working with partners, and that needs to be an effort that is coordinated and designed with the sector by the sector, the way we've done with race. It's not like the government woke up one day and said, hey, do this, and here's all the money. We need to have these conversations and as a sector have a coordinated strategy to then scale and build that capacity in a way that makes technical sense and in a way that future proofs organizations for what's to come.
So, looking ahead, as you say, it's time moves quickly, especially in the technology world, and certainly AI is just it's incredible how quickly it has changed since the general public became aware of it. It's extraordinary. What's your vision for how AI could transform the nonprofit sector in Canada over the next 5 years, and what would it take to get there?
So, what would it take? We're working through it now. I sort of alluded to it in my previous response. That is what keeps us up at night, is what would it take? And practically, not theoretically, what would it take? What are we missing? What are the pieces that already exist? And where do we see gaps, and how we would address them systemically, so that we're not going through the same journey in isolation. And so we're not leaving organizations behind without a roadmap. So very actively thinking through it. What it would take is an open question. It's an inquiry that we are actively pursuing, and we would love to hear from people who want to support us, either as a funder or as a thinking partner or a delivery partner, for us to shape that strategy and vision together. We have some ideas that we've started jotting down, even from the initial conversations around race, because race, we've stripped it down to the bare bones that could be funded. We had a grander vision around it that just didn't fit the proposal's constraints, but maybe we can carry it over into phase two. But then phase two needs a lot more thinking and attention and thoughtful response from the sector and AI ecosystem, and quite frankly, industry and the business ecosystem and the government stakeholders as well, for us to collaboratively figure out in maybe a uniquely made in Canada way, because I think Canada is so unique. We lead by coalition building. We're not divisive in the way that we make change, and I think it makes us perhaps uniquely suited to develop a strategy to move the sector from left to right, which of course is in charge of societal well-being overall and our social safety net in Canada, and do so thoughtfully and safely through a coalition building effort, and not through divisive or top down type of response. So I'm hopeful and quite enthusiastic about the phase two and the thinking that needs to happen there. Really appreciate anybody who would reach out to us to think through this together. And that's what it would take. It would take us engaging in this openly, having these conversations that are maybe hard. What are the ethical constraints and questions? And if you do opt out, are you making an informed choice then? And if so, can we respect that? And if we respect that, what are the use cases where those types of concerns are outweighed by the benefit and the mission delivery? Can we balance the fears of honestly being replaced by AI with an opportunity set of can we augment our work and leverage us and amplify us? Because um, the opportunity is, in my opinion, bigger than the dark side. And I think as a sector, the more we know, the more we understand, the more we are experienced in using AI and in our organizations and our lives, the louder we can be as a voice to then mitigate ethical concerns that came up in the first place, because they are there, because we are not there. We're not at the table right now. And that is why those concerns, in my opinion, are there. And we just can't mitigate them without, in my opinion, having a level of literacy and credibility and the voice to drive those types of changes. And so I'm excited because, to give you a very practical example with Kids Help Phone, at their latest summit, they shared an example of how different models respond to a very morbid prompt, I want to die, and what that would be like if you asked a human volunteer that is experienced in a crisis response. And so seeing those approaches side by side really opens your eyes to the types of change that nonprofits can drive, because they are the experts and they have that deep domain expertise and understanding in the type of work that they do, and that can influence the way these systems are built. And there needs to be research done into that, because I don't know about you, but I'd rather have a human volunteer on the line in that crisis situation. But we know people are turning to these tools in crisis situations as well. And so, in my ideal world, there would be organizations like Kids Help Phone globally showing what the gap looks like to the model builders at OpenAI, Google, etc., and working with them to address those, because internally they have many, many smart people working in these organizations, but there are gaps, and there are domain expertise gaps. And that domain expertise, a lot of it sits in the nonprofit sector around mental health, service delivery, and disaster relief, and many other questions that people will in the future turn to AI for in a one-on-one interaction, as well as the organizations themselves. How can we harmonize what that looks like? How, for example, with Canadian Cancer Society, can they be a source of truth for medical information on cancer care and diagnosis when we know how fast medical misinformation travels? And can we avoid a situation where AI models are trained on essentially erroneous data, leading to terrible potential outcomes where a person would self-diagnose with the wrong type of cancer, which we see concerns of that happening in the medical and healthcare field. And so it's the more we know and the more experts we are, the better drivers we can be of the type of change that we want to see overall for the kind of future society we want to live in, which hopefully involves us solving productivity, and hopefully there is amazing economic growth. But in addition to that, there needs to be a strong societal backbone, and we just won't get there if we leave the really important uh, essential sector behind, which is what the nonprofit sector is.
Well, Elena, I think you've outlined so clearly the risk of us not being there at the table and being involved in helping develop these systems for social good are, you know, enormous. And thank you for the very important work you're doing and for sharing your insights and advice to Canadian nonprofits struggling to learn how to harness the power of AI for their own purpose-driven work. Thank you for joining us on Charity Village Connects.
Thank you very much. I hope it wasn't too morbid of a conversation
Oh,
by
no.
the end of it.
No, it's not. It's really important, and I like the fact that you've indicated just how critical it is that the nonprofit sector is at the table, because otherwise these people who are designing these systems can't possibly know, what it's like to be, people serving in that way. There's so
Yeah.
much education to be done, even with the folks that are building the tools.
Yeah, and eventually policy and regulation will catch up, but the human cost of that is
Yep.
something that I'm very worried about.
Yeah.
And if we can get in front of it now and not wait for the government and regulation to act, which they will in response to terrible things that we're setting up for that now. So yeah, really want to avoid the dark side as much as possible.